So first one for today is how to work with a coach who's stuck in their ways. Okay, so what this means. So this week, two of my lacrosse goal university members called me up with, they're both in clubs, and one is in a bit of a hotbed, the other one is not, and this goalie has transferred school, like transferred club, new club, and the coach on the first day is like basically telling this goalie they should throw out everything they've learned and do it his way. And um and that always bothers me from a coaching perspective, because when a coach, this happened a couple years ago to one of my female goalies, got off to like a Division 2 school, and the first day of practice, the goalie coach, who was like the goalie who had graduated the year before and who was a volunteer assistant coach, made all the goalies. There was like four goalies, and she made them all stand with a certain stance, kind of weird, and this goalie developed a knee injury because of it. Now that's a bit of an extreme example, but it's possible. And so as a coach, um, you know, my job as a coach is to get your goalie ready for the next level, and then the next level, and then the next level. The job is not to make them look like a Division 1 goalie now or a pro goalie now, no matter what their age is. And so whether your goalie is 6 or 16, if they come to me the first day I see them, I'm not blowing everything up, because that's silly. Okay, because your goalie has a number of reps behind them that have been working for them to some degree. Now we can look to improve those things, but you have to take into consideration like physical ability for one. That's a big one. And just to use an example, a lot of you have goalies or have had goalies that are short, right? And a 6 foot tall lacrosse net doesn't really it doesn't really help a short goalie. A lot of goals go in upstairs, and I've argued for smaller nets for a really long time, not just for the younger ages, but actually for the older ages too. Because I think when we shrink the nets a bit, equipment will be a better conversation than it is today. But that's a story for another day. So when you have a coach who is kind of stuck in their ways and they say like it's my way or the highway, that's a tough position to be in. That is not an ideal position for any athlete, no matter what the sport. Okay. Because I believe that first and foremost, an athlete should be based on merit, like that sport is a meritocracy, but a good coach is going to help expose that athlete to new ideas that should make them better. Now, in that mode, I've got a video going to athletespecific.com in 2 weeks on my coaching model, which is like we have entertainment, edutainment, and then educate. Okay, so when your athlete goes to a new club, um, the first thing they want to have is you want to have a good time, right? Your goalie wants to enjoy being there, right? And we're going to cover this a little bit in the focus segment in the next segment. But the idea is that your goalie wants to enjoy being there, and if a coach makes them jumps right to educate, and your goalie doesn't really have any rapport there. It depends on in their development. Like when I was a young goalie, like I always say, like I was an Olympian in a timed event and a goalie in every sport I played. Just tell me what I need to know to get better, and I'll do it. Right? But not every kid is like that. All right, not every kid is like that. They're not looking for new information. They're just looking to play well. Right. And so there's a little bit of a disconnect there. So a coach first has to come in and develop some rapport, but also your goalie needs to come and be open, right? To be open to some ideas. Now, if the ideas that your goalie understands, the idea that a coach all of a sudden gives your goalie, well, that's like oil and water, man. And it takes some serious shaking to get that stuff to mix up before you can put it on a salad, right? Like it's just not going to work. But what happens is, by my definition, a coach who is set in their ways is not open or willing to change in the face of new information. So just like your goalie may be not open to what that coach is telling you, or they may feel like they're fine, right? Hey, I'm good. I'm good, right? And we've all seen kids like that that just think they've got it all figured out, and that's cool. But they're not going to be open to new ideas if they're resistant to the coach. And if the coach comes like right on the first day and just goes like, the way you've been playing forever sucks, and I want you to change it, well, that's not really a really good relationship recipe there, right? So it's really important to understand that. Um, you know, So one thing that I'm not talking about being set in your ways is having a routine that gets you to peak state. So I wrote about this in my book, but the idea is like your goalie wants to get into a peak state every day, and having a routine as an athlete is really important. That's different. That is like we want to have a routine to kind of ramp up. I kind of think of athletes like when you hear one of those like air raid sirens, and they're like, that you have to crank them up, and it's like that's what we're doing with an athlete before a practice in a game is we're winding them up and getting them ready to go. So that routine is different. Being set in those ways can actually be quite helpful, but in a coaching standpoint, it's in my opinion, it's not really great at all. Okay. So one of the reasons why your coach may be stuck in their ways, okay, is because they lack the resources like time, energy, or money to be open and therefore affected by new ideas. Right. So this gets a little advanced, but bear with me here. Okay. So when you go to your coach and your coach has been coaching lacrosse, they played goalie 30 years ago and they never got hit in the body when they played. So that like that sort of stuff to me is like, even within our own group on our Facebook group, sometimes when people say like, "Oh, I've never had that problem and I'm 50 and yada yada." It's like, "No, I'm not trying to make a goalie to be as good as that coach was. I'm trying to make goalies that are game changers." Right? That's my philosophy because why are we bothering? Right? And when you think about becoming a game-changing athlete, no matter where you are right now, and for parents listening to me say that they're like, "Oh, my little guy, I don't know if my little guy's gonna be D1 goalie." Well, they sure as hell won't be if you think that they can't be. But if you think that they could be, they just might be. All right. So I know there's a lot of words there, but hopefully you figure out. But the idea here is like a lot of coaches, if your coach is like a volunteer coach, right? And which most people run into is that they don't, they might be working a full-time job and they're volunteering or they're retired and they're just out there having fun, like whatever. They're just not really open to being changed. They don't see the value in anything, the anything different. And what a lot of coaches have trouble with is a lot of coaches have trouble seeing their athletes be better than they were. The coach was. Does that make sense? That's a tough one, but it happens like because when I work with goalies, like especially up and down the East Coast, I see this happen over and over and over again. I see competitive coaches, like one coach who played against another coach from another state in their, when they went to college, and they're still fighting it out. Like they're still competing through their goalies on the field. It drives me nuts. But if your coach is not a full-time coach dedicated to athletic performance, you're gonna have trouble there. Now, also, there are camps and coaches and clinics that are trying to make a brand for themselves. And this, I called this out like 6 years ago. When I saw goalies coming out of a certain place that will remain nameless, where they were teaching a style because they wanted to brand their goalies as theirs. And that to me, when it comes to coaching, is the lowliest of information, right? Like as a coach, a true coach doesn't take credit for their athlete's success, right? That to me is like rule number one of great coaching. It's like you're not taking credit because a coach who does that realizes that we provide the information, they provide the effort, right? And so the information is useless without the effort. So any coach that tries to take credit or somebody who kind of um who like what's the word for this, but like it just doesn't make sense to me. So some coaches are like that and you got to be careful about that. um so what happens is like, so when does, and this is important to understand, when might a coach get like set in their ways? Well, one, when they become lazy, right? So again, back to that kind of that time, energy, money thing. If they're just kind of like going along the board, they're just going to say like, "This is all I know." This is, when you go to a coach, you're basically going from a brain dump of information, right? Whenever I went to a goalie coach or a coach in any sport that I played, what you're doing is you're paying for their knowledge to expedite your development, right? But sometimes if a coach is just like stuck here and all you're getting is like stale soda, right? For lack of a better term, that's not cool. The other thing is that it can happen for kids too, right? So some goalies, as I mentioned before, they're like, "Hey, I'm good," I don't need any coaching. I'm fine. I know what I'm doing. Well, okay. But that goes against my gem theory, which is like any coach, everybody you listen, every coach you go to, you should get some gem from anybody. From some coaches, you're going to get more gems, but you can get a gem from anywhere. All right, a gem of information is what I mean there. Okay, um, so scientifically, when people get to be about 30 years old, inputs start to stagnate, right? You kind of everybody's reading the same newspapers, the same websites, they're listening to the same music that they listened to in high school. While people can change, like personality isn't permanent. Great book by Dr. Benjamin Hardy, but the idea is like people kind of get stale, right? And so that's important to understand. Um, and so these coaches are avoiding new inputs or they are protecting their old inputs. Okay, so that's really important to understand is that some coaches are very like they're afraid to look wrong, so we don't want that. Okay, so your athlete doesn't need that, um, and those coaches are not open or looking for a reason to change, as I mentioned, and they don't see the value in something new, and that's really important. So if your athlete, right, if your goalie comes to you and says, "Hey, I want to be a Division 1 lacrosse player," right, or I want to play in the PLL, your job as a parent or as a coach is to not stifle that, right? Right? It's not to go like, "Oh, well, we'll see it doesn't work like that." Right? If a kid comes to you and says, "I want to be a Division 1 lacrosse goalie," great. We are going to plan for that. Now the problem is if your coach like was or wasn't, they have their own limit they have their own limitations. And that's really difficult. Like I was on the phone 2 weeks ago with a college coach and I asked this coach, "What was the best level of lacrosse you ever played?" And I knew the answer. And I said, "Can you see yourself as a coach having played better?" And their answer was no. Their answer was no. That's so if your coach is limited by their own thinking of themselves, they're probably going to be limited in the way they think about you. And that's something that I tell myself every day when I'm working with an athlete, no matter what the sport. I'm like, my job is to see them playing at like at the highest level because we begin with the end in mind, right? So that's really important. Okay, so you're looking when you have that philosophy, then all this information, your brain now is looking for all sorts of information to help you get there. If it doesn't, if it doesn't have that kind of that goal or that vision, your brain's just going to lose info. Like it's just all this information, wasted information is going to fly by, right? And that happens for the athlete and the coach. Okay. A lot of coaches, as you guys know, and I've said this for years, there's a lot of there's a lot of coaches in the lacrosse position in the lacrosse community who are very much stuck in the old lax bro culture, right? The suck it up, like and to me, suck it up is the last coaching technique you ever use with an athlete. It can be effective and it can offend some people, but the truth is that sometimes, yes, an athlete does have to suck it up. But for a lot of coaches that can't communicate how to get an athlete better, they go to that first. And that to me, it's like when I learned years ago that there's a direct correlation between the amount of words used in a community and their crime rates, blew me away. Okay. Blew me away. So when you think about that from a coaching perspective, a coach needs a vocabulary to help your athlete develop. Like, and if they don't have it, you're kind of hosed. Okay. Um, and so yeah, so that's something to really consider, right? So consider, but that's tough for you as a parent. As a parent, it's tough for you as a goalie because when you go into a new program, this coach is like I always say coaches should be um, they should be conduits, not gatekeepers. So what I mean by that is like a coach should not be gatekeeping you from another opportunity. They should be a conduit to it. Right. And we all know that people are people and there's bad people out there. And there's people who are like, oh, other goalies, the coaches, the other goalies, dad, yada, yada, blah, 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 gatekeeper. Right. Ideally, you want a coach who's a conduit. Right. And that takes a special person. So you got to be looking for that. All right. But what I tell my athletes is this is you need to be respectfully disagreeable. What I mean by that is that as in anything, what I'm about to say is ideal, doesn't always happen, but you have to develop the people skills in order to make it happen. And so what I tell my goalies is I want you to be respectfully disagreeable. So what does that mean? If you learn something from me that I've told you, I want you to go out to another coach. I want you to go somewhere else and I want you to see how what I taught you holds up. Okay. And at that point, if you get a difference of opinion, the athlete's job is to take both those opinions and then find out which one helps them make more saves or more clears or more or become a better communicator, whatever it is. And then I want them to come back to me and tell me what they learned. Because if my idea was wrong or didn't help them, I want to know, right? I want to know. But a lot of coaches don't do that. A lot of coaches just go, no, it's my way or else. So your athlete can't even go to that coach and say, hey, coach, why do you teach it that way? Because a lot of coaches can't give you a good answer. And if they can't give you a good answer, or if they say it's like, hey, it's because grandma always cut the pot roast, well, that's not good enough. If you and as a parent paying money to develop your athlete for anything, you should have a better response, right? You should have a better response. Okay. And you've got to fight for that response. And if you don't get it, then you got to figure out what to do about it. Because one of the things that happens is that there are you got to pick your battles. Now, what I hate to do is tell an athlete like technically that they need to adopt a certain style just to appeal to their coach. Now, it's one thing if the coach says, "Hey, why don't you try this?" And then all of a sudden you go through your stats after 4 games and you go, "Oh yeah, that actually did help me on saves or clears or whatever." But if you're not keeping that data, you don't know. And if the coach isn't keeping that data, he doesn't know either, right? He's just going on a whim. What I encourage all my goalies to do is make sure you have the data, right? Go download my cheat sheets, get out a sheet of paper, do whatever. It's not hard, right? But keep track of your stats, keep track of your goalie's stats. I'm working with a junior ice hockey goalie, right? At athletespecific.com in my other business, one of my athletes is a junior hockey goalie, and they've been keeping stats on this goalie since they were 7 years old. The parents have, and it has been amazing. Like this kid's a stud, right? And so don't be afraid of being that parent because you're keeping stats on the sideline and you're not talking to anybody. You're not being social. Like don't worry about that, right? But um, you should be asking questions and getting answers, right? Now, again, it goes back to resources, though. Some coaches don't have the time, right? They might be working with a whole team. They might be understaffed. They might have 2 assistants, but those assistants are goofballs and they don't know what to do with the goalie. And the coach is like, ah, dang it, I got to give something to my goalie, but they might not even know. For my Lacrosse Goalie University members, I get on the phone with their coach if it's appropriate, right? And we do that. We work as a team. We work as a unit to help the goalie, and then the goalie there in turn helps the entire defensive half of the field, right? And so that's a really valuable thing to have, right? Now the thing here is that the relationship with your coach should be a partnership. Now I know that's not always true, and that's where you've got to pick your battles, right? You've got to pick your battles. And I know some families, they'll sign up for a club team or a new club team, and the coach sells them a bill of goods, and they finally get on the team, and they're like, "Dang it, this isn't what we thought it was going to be like at all." This team or this coach or that, the kids are just jerks or whatever, and then you're biding your time, right? And then you're finding what team you can be on next. And so I get it. And other times you just got to sweep stuff under the rug, right? And that's a tough lesson. So yeah. So you have to kind of tread on that lightning. So, but be respectfully disagreeable. Okay. Be respectfully disagreeable. Ask your coach, coach, listen, can you give me a few minutes? I don't understand why we're doing this on the clear. Right. Or, Karen over there, every time I try to do this, Karen doesn't listen. Do you notice that? Because that's what I'm seeing. And just be asking questions, because when you ask those questions, and parents, you can help facilitate those questions, okay, from the very beginning with your coach. You should have a relationship there too. Just facilitate the asking of those questions, and then what happens, your goalie comes back and they're stronger for it, they're better for it. Okay. All right, does that make sense? All right, guys, thanks for watching and thanks for listening wherever you are. Do me a favor, hit the like button if you like this, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. When you're ready, head on over to lacrossegoalieuniversity.com/coaching so I can work with you and your goalie. And while you're at it, check out athletespecific.com to learn more about mental performance and high performance. You may not know this, but I work with athletes in a variety of sports. Lacrosse is my love, but man, I love athletes and the families who support them. So head on over to athletespecific.com, check it out. I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.